What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage number 35. Hope you're having a great evening, a great week as we're kind of moving into this Christmas season. So, the interesting thing is, I've been spending a lot of time over the past couple of weeks in the IR reactive load space, and I thought no better time to talk about it than when I'm kind of in the throes of a bunch of demos in that regard. So, with that in mind, I do not profess to be the world's leading expert on IRs or reactive load boxes, but I can tell you I'm using a lot of them these days. And so kind of the ideas around how, if you've never used them, what exactly they are, the benefits thereof, some of the nuances in there, and then like you were just hearing there, that is a brand new plugin from the amazing people over at Celestion. And kind of the unique thing that about what I get a chance to do is I have been presented with some really unique opportunities to work with manufacturers. So, in terms of Celestion, this is a brand new plugin. I was able to hang out with some of the key folks from Celestion and put together basically a video series taking pieces of an extended Zoom call that we did, where we're basically breaking that content up and wrapping it around this brand new Speaker Mix Pro plugin. And basically, what Celestion has done is they have taken this concept of the IR that in many ways is kind of the static. It's kind of just almost as if you will a snapshot of a speaker in a particular mode. That is to say, it's just that speaker in one finite moment of time. And for those of us that love to pummel our various 412 cabinets and 112s and 115s and 412s and all of that, a speaker is this thing that's very dynamic. And so the concept of what Celestion has done is they've taken this DSR technology, which is basically dynamic speaker responses, which is their response to IRs, impulse responses, which is basically like, let me take a snapshot of a speaker kind of in one of its modes, and then you're just going to plug your amp into it. And what Celestion has done is they provided a range from, I believe it's thin and dark 2 are the two extremes, and then they have had these kind of settings across that you could select those presets. What's great about the new plugin is you can kind of use this, I think they refer to it as non-interpolative ability to slide across that range of tones, and then you can mix and match different IRs, or in this particular case, DSRs, and do all sorts of things, mix different cabinets, microphones, and it's basically like a speaker and speaker cabinet playpen for those of us that are so inclined, of which I very much am. And I think most of us at this point are living in places where we are no longer, especially in our quote-unquote home environments, where we can just take our amp and dime it. That doesn't work for a lot of us. So, in any case, first of all, it's always a pleasure to be here with you. Good to see. Hello, Chris. Always nice, my dear friend. Always good to see you in the house. Chris Stark, hello. I had a feeling we were going to have your attention tonight. Tom, what's going on? Bruce Adolph, good to see you, my friend. Ramiro Caballero, how are you doing, my friend? It's been a moment. Great to see you. Feliz Navidad. Okay, so here's the thing: is that clip that you heard there a minute ago was in fact Speaker Mix Pro, and I have done a certain amount to socialize that and put it in front of people. But I'm first of all, in the humble version of it, immensely proud of kind of the work that I'm able to do around this new technology, because it's nice to be able to kind of put my hands on and go, okay, here's what I found works really well. So let's just back up a step and just say any IR or DSR is more or less based on the things that we know or we don't know about amps and speakers. And the same thing as we talk about these reactive load boxes. I've just wrapped up a series with the folks over at Rev, and on the D20s, and in so doing, the thing about these, as I say to my wife all the time, I'm in school. I don't necessarily know what I'm studying for, but I know I'm in school. And so what's happening is I create these videos that are way more in depth than maybe they ordinarily would, could, or should be, but the whole point is to kind of do this expository research and then share that with people such that when you're inside there kind of doing this stuff, you're not knocking your head against the wall going kind of like, what do I do here? So, the reality is there was a day and age where you could plug into an amplifier and turn it up, and the sound people wouldn't yell at you, and if you play at church, they wouldn't throw stuff at you. They don't throw stuff at you, but the point being, the idea of a loud guitar amplifier is something that is going away for many of us. So especially in this kind of COVID era. So how do we kind of navigate that? So one of the neat things is these reactive load boxes. And so first of all, like I was starting to say before I interrupted myself, the experience of plugging in your guitar, although it's not behind me, there it is right over there. That amplifier that Chris Stark knows all about is the JP2C. And that is one of my favorite amplifiers for higher gain stuff. It is wonderfully aggressive, and it's kind of one of my go-to amplifiers for a certain group of sounds. I always know I can go to it. And so the idea of using that and running that out into something like Speaker Mix Pro is kind of one of the sounds that, first of all, I know people want to go, well, what does it do, when you go to chunk? How does it sound? My 8 string is tuned to a I actually had to double check. This is a low E. I mean, dare I say it? You wait, ready for it? Drop E. I mean, seriously. So the reality of that is it is a ridiculously crazy sound. And so what we take from the analog world and working with these amps, we bring them into the IR and the reactive load box world. Hello to the other folks there. I can see a couple more comments here. So yes, I want to jump in and make sure I hit everybody there. And Wayne, I see you. So the thing is this, is that kind of one of the things is that my wife has these books called Cook's Kitchen, I think is what they're called. And they basically do these cooking experiments. It's kind of one of the things that I get a chance to do here, where I get a chance to plug different things in. So I have the privilege of having the JP2C. I've got the D20s. I've got AC30 and the deluxe reverbs and just a whole range of things that I can either natively, just plug into a speaker cabinet, or with something like the D20, I can run a speaker cabinet and it's got an internal reactive load, or something I can just take a tap off the speaker and run in there. So the idea is this experience that we're trying to capture is really just the raw organic thing that happens when we plug in our guitar. And ideally best when you have nothing in between you and the amplifier, and you plug into that amplifier and magic happens. And that is often the exception to the rule, but ultimately the ultimate IR and reactive load experience is capturing that thing when it's really nothing but you and the amplifier, and it's the right guitar, it's the right amplifier, and it's the right speaker cabinet. And Peter Stapfer is one of the two Peters involved with Dsl amplifiers. And he and I had a long, extended conversation at an amp show a decade or so ago about why, if possible, you want to use the matching cabinet that came with the head, or the matching speaker that came with the combo that the manufacturer designed and tuned that amplifier for, because they had something very specific in mind, especially with Dsl where there's all this low end happening. The same thing with the Boogie tall cabinets. Those are kind of my go-to, plug in the JP2C, turn that thing up way too loud, and just go chunk, 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 chunk. Same thing with that Plexi Marshall there. You just kind of want to plug into, and that's a reissue cabinet, and I'm in the process of maybe buying a very, 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 very old Marshall cabinet, which I'm kind of excited about. So I am in speaker geekdom mode. The point being is there is something that happens when you just plug straight into that amplifier, the way the amp and the speaker react to one another. A few weeks back, we had Jeff Flingloff on the show, and one of the things he's talking about was that interaction between the head and the power amp and the power tubes and the speaker cabinet, and this basically the resonance and the presence and the way they kind of are pushing back and forth on each other. Not to mention the fact that the speaker itself is kind of doing its own thing. So with that said, that essence of you're plugging in, you're feeling all this interactivity is the heart and soul of the guitar amplifier cabinet experience. And so harnessing that and getting it to, at the very least, sound close enough to it inside the box that you don't cringe is a thing. And so no horn tooting at all, but as a point of relevance, a bunch of the Guitar Hero stuff that I did was using the Marshall Tsl amp that I had, which I gleefully sold. One of the worst amps I've ever owned. If you're thinking about buying one, don't. But I was using that in a Palmer speaker simulator. And the thing is, the Palmer was a non-reactive load, and it just kind of basically was an imitation cabinet. But what was neat is it made it easy to kind of take the sound of that amp, get it close to the sound of that, what it would sound like plugged into a cabinet, and then run that straight into your DAW. And I did the 17 track for Winger. I did the Extreme Play With Me track on that. And both of those sound really Marshall-y. No One Like You. Scorpions, duh. But the thing is that it really, it was spending some extended time working with this kind of, load box and then kind of can speaker vibe. Things are much better now in that they sound much more like what would actually happen if you were to actually kind of mic these things up. So with that said, we kind of now get to that next little piece of that interaction, which is like, okay, well, if we've got this great sounding amplifier, how do we approach capturing it without one of these devices in a traditional analog scenario? And that arguably is with the combination of one of kind of the three go-to microphones, Shure SM57, Royer 121, my favorite pair, and then a Sennheiser MD421. Generally not my favorite mic, but there are certain instances where the 57 and the 121 haven't gotten there. Now, that said, let's just talk about for that particular world. And it's not in any of the IRs or DSRs that I've got. There's also a mic that I absolutely love called the Roswell Pro Audio Mini K47. And if you're just looking for one mic that enables you to kind of get the combined goodness of a 121, which is not a cheap mic, and a 57 just kind of lives in one microphone, that's the mic. There are very, very, very few amplifiers that I've never been able to just stick one of those in front of it and just get the vibe. All right, with that out of the way, that microphone combination and placement is how you capture that stuff and you bring it into the box. Generally speaking, the vibe that I go for much of the time is to capture what an amp sounds like in the room, such that, somebody in a demo situation can kind of go, that is the essence of that amplifier. That, in many ways, is the antithesis of what actually happens when we make records, where pretty much everything below 100 hertz, they're just going to chop off. And it was an engineer the other day, they actually said they chopped off either everything below 120 or even 140, I think, if I heard them right. So it basically means all the stuff that's in the way of the bass, masking the bass, they just cut that stuff out. For the guitar player, many of us just sit in our rooms and we craft tracks around the sound of our guitar rig. And so as an end result, as opposed to having this whole band situation where we're trying to make all the pieces fit, and in theory, that's one of the great things about rehearsals, we begin to fine tune where our settings are set. So one, we can hear ourselves. I'm sure all of us have had that experience, dialing this great sound, and then the band comes in and your guitar evaporates. It's because much of your signal is living where other people are creating sounds, and your guitar just kind of goes away. It gets masked. And, so then ensue the volume wars. Ideally, and this is, by the way, my other big tip, and I think I've mentioned this before, when ultimately tracking with IRs, I cannot tell you how much I've learned this again and again and again. Make sure you keep the volume down for enough of the time that you don't when you turn everything up, you can hear all the detail. And all of a sudden, when you cram stuff down at a lower volume, some of the ugly stuff becomes much more apparent because your ears just aren't being overloaded with this stuff. All right. So the point being is we have this guitar, amplifier, speaker cabinet experience. We mic that up. We bring that into the box. And hopefully it sounds good and plays nicely with the other instruments. Basically, that microphone and speaker cabinet business, generally, unlike tracking with IRs, you kind of want the volume up, which is where something like a reactive load box like the 2-Notes Torpedo and the 2-Notes Chapter X becomes really valuable. I've actually got both the 8-ohm version and the 16-ohm version here, and they are great. And so I've had a bunch of playing time with them now, and the software is phenomenal. And so basically it's more or less what's built into the D20s, but it's a slight variation in that it's a standalone box that, as opposed to being embedded inside the D20, you can basically stick your speaker cable into it and come out of your JP2C or whatever it is. And then what's great about the 2-Notes environment, which features a number of officially sanctioned Celestion speakers and various cabinets, inspired by different manufacturers, is you can more or less find within their software the exact exact cabinet and speaker you're looking for. Now, that same thing, however, you can also then achieve a similar result in using something like the Helix, where now what you're going to do is you come out of the Helix and you're just not going to use a cabinet model. Or you can come out of the Helix and go into something like the D20, use the reactive load in the D20, either before or after the internal power amp, and run that into the box. And while we're going to rabbit trail there, the deal is the D20 allows you to send the direct out either before or after the power amp. That's got a built-in pair of 6v6s, which is essentially the sound and the vibe of a deluxe reverb, which is arguably the best pedal platform on the planet. It just sounds great. And it's also lovely, buttery, Fender, American-inspired sound, so you can choose to include that, or you can basically take the feed for the direct out before that point. And one of the great things about the 2-Notes Torpedo technology is it allows you to then load in not only virtual cabinets and speakers and microphones and reverbs, but also virtual power amps. So now you can basically take that platform of running the Helix into that guy, and in turn, and depending on what you're doing with the Helix, so if you're just using that for stomps, run it into the front end of the D20, harness the the preamp section, bypass the power amp section, use whatever power amp section you're wanting to do in the 2-Notes Torpedo remote software, and then all of a sudden you've got 3 very powerful pieces to this transaction. Now, one of the other things that you can do, and it's one of the things that I did in some of the demo work for the Celestion Speaker Mix Pro, was I actually incorporated the 2-Notes Torpedo's software that comes along with Chapter X, but I did not incorporate the speaker models. So it enabled me to basically use the reactive load to just kind of capture this then, and you go inside the software and say, all right, I don't want the IRs and the cabinet stuff, and then pass that signal into Speaker Mix Pro. And so these DSRs, the thing that makes them special is that they are highly reactive to the touch. The other thing is the plugin. Did I bring in my grab? No, I didn't. Oh, well, I can go to the countdown. Hang on a second. Give me a moment to unmute my mic. Just one sec. All right, so we're looking at a graphic there, and let me get rid of the countdown for just a moment. Where is my countdown graphic? There is my countdown graphic. You're going away. Oh, come on. Oh, you're not going to let me do... Oh, because I've got the scene locked. My bad. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to make you go away for a second. There we go. So as you're looking at that, on the left, you're actually seeing the back of the Rev, and on the right-hand side there, you're actually seeing the interface for, with the exception of my overlay there, for Celestion Speaker Mix Pro. But essentially, you're seeing all those different channel strips that allow you to load different DSRs as well as your own IRs. And so it's an incredibly powerful way that you can take, like I said, this 121 and 57. First of all, as soon as you load that on a channel strip, it takes your mono input, if you're running in mono, and splits it to stereo. And through some amazing wizardry, and I don't quite know what they're doing or how they're doing it, it just takes a stereo path and turns it into this mono, beautiful stereo split, even if you're just using one mic'd up speaker. It's magic. And then if you bring it into the center, it'll sum in the center without any phase business. All right, let me just go through here and see if there's any comments that I want to address before we do this. I want to hear amp reactive DSR. Wayne, I love you, brother. Okay, I bought a match pair of the Mini K47s due to Doug's recommendation. Very happy with them. Brian, I love you, bro. And I'm glad that you're happy with them. And they sound amazing. And again, if there's one mic that you can just kind of go, not have to, because here's the thing. There is the common use, and then there's the kind of like, hey, you know what? If I just want to have one microphone, which is, a giant deal, let's not even go too far down the phase conversation, but when you start mixing two microphones together, the short version is when you create a, and any of us who've been in a DAW know that the wave goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it goes down. Well, first of all, if you get the phase inverted, one's going up and the other's going down, and they start to cancel each other out. The more alike those two signals are, the more they cancel each other out. That's as far as we'll go with that. So Wayne, what have we got that is, let me see here, amp reactive DSR. That would be the 8-string. Let me do a little magic in the background, because that was the Petrucci. So okay, so I'll call myself out here, because this is one of the best things I can also do is say mistakes that I've made. So 2 weeks ago, I think I played one of the original 8-string tracks I did, or 1 week ago. And I was monitoring some ridiculous volume level, and it sounded amazing. And then when I played it back at like fly level, I was like, that sounds terrible. And I was like, I must have had something unmuted that I didn't want. I went back and listened to it, and I was like, no, you were just monitoring it too loud. And unlike, when you're listening with a traditionally mic'd cabinet, I think you can get away with playing things at a much higher volume. But with the IRs, they seem to be a little bit, it's just a different experience. So that doesn't mean you can't be tracking and playing at higher volumes, but make sure, one, you don't blow your ears out, because once you kind of get things to a certain volume level, and whether it's fatigue, ear fatigue that is, or just kind of you've reached a certain point and your ears just kind of go, they can't hear things, and it's honestly, it's ear fatigue. But traditionally, ear fatigue refers to the fact that you've been sitting there at the monitors for 3 or 4 hours recording, versus like you just were sitting there for an hour just blasting your ears out, and you're like silly putty. All right, Wayne, I'm going to come back to a couple of things in a minute. Oh, okay, hang on a second. I've got some folks over here in YouTube land, so let me say hello to folks in YouTube. First of all, again, Chris, always a pleasure. Andrew, hello. Andy Guitar, always a pleasure, you know that. Chris Alexander. So Chris was on my stream last night. So actually, okay, so we are going to go there in this phase conversation, because Chris asked a great question last night, which was, if you're using two cabinets together, whether it's dual mono or in stereo, does it matter how they're spaced? And I thought that is a really clever question, because if you put one slightly ahead of the other in a small acoustic space, a minute ago I was talking about this kind of this wave where one's going up and the other's going down. Well, what happens is you start to get them offset, non-time aligned. So one goes into its rise before the other, and you'll get some phase cancellation when that happens. So ideally, if you're going to have them side by side, get them aligned such that they're kind of on a common x-axis, I guess would be the way to describe that, right? All right. In terms of one on top of the other, that is a funny thing. First of all, you'll notice that I use uh, the isoacoustics uh, isolators underneath all my studio monitors, and then they also make the same basic thing for guitar amplifiers. And the idea is you're decoupling that speaker and its cabinet from the environment on which it is placed. And that is actually ends up being a big deal. Now, the interesting thing is classically, um, I've got a stack over there where the kind of the wheels are in the receptacle. The wheels of the top cabinet are sitting in the bottom cabinet. Ideally, that's probably not the best way to kind of isolate it. Now, arguably, if you've got a rubber wheel sitting into kind of the receptacle on the lower cabinet, that will do a certain amount to decouple. Because if you think about rubber, it's not like you've got a piece of wood next to another piece of wood. Like if you've ever stuck your guitar neck up against some sheetrock, then and all of a sudden you hear the wall come alive. That's the sort of decoupling that we try and do when we use those isolators like that, right? So the idea of putting one on top of the other, if you're placing two cabinets, well, again, take a look. There's a classic example. I'm isolating them. I'm being very purposeful about the fact that I do not want either of those cabinets, when I'm actually using a speaker in there, to start making the cabinet below it start to rumble and have that get into, as my buddy Dave Morrison would say, create smear. And I don't want, and if I happen to have the 412 on, I don't want it sending information up into the 112 up there as well. So that is a big deal in my world, and those, they sound great and they work really well. That's a great question. Yes, so the great thing about the SpeakerMix Pro is it gives you lots of options, and I love it. Slidewinder, what's going on, my man? Good to see you. I have your lap steel here, by the way. You know that. Do stereo mics eliminate the two-channel phase cancellation issue? That is a great question. I'm going to hedge my lack of knowledge by saying this. If you turn them such that they're not straight on, my guess is you're affecting, again, that kind of time alignment. So let's say a buddy of mine once made this analogy, and I love this. If you're flying from San Francisco to Oakland, and you're 1 degree off, you're still going to probably end up in Oakland. If you're flying from San Francisco to New York and you're 1 degree off, you could end up in New Jersey, which for many people is an awesome thing. For other people, is not necessarily the desired result. So if you think about a stereo source, where in theory, if it's a true stereo source where the sound is coming out, like we were talking about a minute ago, truly happening at the same time, you're wanting to pick that up coherently, presuming it's phase aligned at the source. You don't want to be angling that thing like this at the place that you're picking it up, because my belief is you do have the ability to impact the lack of time alignment. And when they're out of time alignment, that is to say, this one's closer, so it's hearing that information faster than this one, which means because they're time misaligned, they're going to be phase misaligned as well. Which is right. No, as a matter of fact, I know that also because when we did the ultimate speaker demo, so actually, what an idiot. One of the things that I did with the folks at Celestion and Electro Voice and Eminence was we did a thing at 25th Street Recording with my old company, Gear Tunes, and we basically had Orange ship like 20 some odd cabinets, and Royer sent out a bazillion 121s, and I had more 57s and still do than any one person could ever probably use. And basically, Neil Dorfsman was the engineer on that project, and he was the guy responsible for the guitar sounds on Hysteria, Money for Nothing. I mean, like as good as they get. And he would do a thing where he would run a click through the microphones to time align them so they would be phase aligned. So yes, so the idea is if you're using a pair of microphones that, essentially, even if it's a 57 and a 121, they are effectively a stereo microphone if they have two thingies. In any case, capsules, thank you. So the idea is that you want those capsules time and phase aligned. So the idea is that by running, he would basically record a metronome coming out of the guitar speaker cabinets into the microphones, run that into Pro Tools, and he would have the assistant adjust one of the microphones until they were perfectly time aligned. So my belief is the answer is yes, but I need to do a little bit of research because that is a great question. All right, G-Man, what's going on, my man? Sir Reactive Load and 2 Notes cab was one of my best purchases. I can play my Agnator Mod 50 with any speaker cabinet and mic of my choice and enjoy. You know, the other thing that many people don't know about, and awesome, is that with 2 Notes, you have the ability to access these things via MIDI. So the great thing about the D20 is that it has the ability to have 6 basic presets that are a combination, again, of if you bypass the built-in power amp, virtual power amp with an array of power tubes, virtual speaker cabinet and IRs, and then your choice of microphones. And the idea is not only do you have those 6 positions, but there's actually 128 presets of which you can dial up not only the 6 from the face of the amp, but the 6 on the face of the amp are the first of 128. So basically with some sort of MIDI controller or MIDI switcher, you're able to then just kind of go completely nuts and bring that into your live rig, which is nuts, which I love. Yes, 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 and yes. Phase interference. Phase interference is bad. Hold on a second. The cheap version of those isolators are tennis balls cut in half. That's like the old folks have on their walkers. I love that. Are stereo mics used up close to a source? That is a great question. The answer is sometimes. About a week and a half ago, I did this crazy thing. As I traveled to Alabama, and a buddy of mine is the creative arts director at this giant church, and they had a 50-piece orchestra. So if you think about kind of the range of things that you're micing inside that situation, there's just a bunch of different types of things. So the folks at DPA provided, first of all, the church already had a bunch of DPA stuff, but the DPA folks brought tens of thousands of dollars of microphones. And so they were miking a range of instruments. So stereo piano mics, which quite often will come in a matched pair, are actually close mic. Now, they are not necessarily right next to each other in a cluster, but they are close miking the piano there in that sort of a scenario, because there will be some bleed in that thing. So where they had the piano, convertible top up, the mics, as I recall, were about this far away from the strings, or I guess they call it the string bed. So I'm not the world's greatest expert on this, but like I said at the beginning, I know what I know, and I know what I'm learning, and that's why this is part 1, because it's exciting stuff. All right, the green tennis balls isolate better than the orange ones, unless you're playing a red guitar. So, all right, let's see what's happening over here in the Book of Face. All right. Okay, all right, hold on. Somebody said Waza. Sean, I am using the Boss Waza tube amp expander and loving it. Do you know if there's a way to map a BPM setting from an ES8 to the TAE via MIDI? To answer your question, honestly, I would say I don't know for a fact. However, having spent a prolific, this is kind of the fun thing about Doppler's Test Kitchen, is like having spent a bunch of time here in the ES3, which, by the way, is a great little box. Holy cow. And let's see if I can find my way to the proper scene over here. And where are you? There we go. That should be. And then the GT 1000 core there's a bunch of stuff that they share in common in terms of what Boss does. So that is to say, when you go, probably more than any other company other than line 6 where you kind of have these synonymous products like HX Stomp and Helix and Helix Rack. Boss has done an exceptional job of, if you will, kind of non-synonymous products of doing things that make sense. So, for example, and this is stuff that I've learned largely from Jeff at Boss, is, for example, there's a thing they've got called patch exchange, which is kind of a standard Boss thing. And where you would use this is, say, for example, you're doing a 5-song set, and your lead vocalist, 3 minutes before the show says, I want to swap songs, I don't know, 4 and 5. No, how about 3 and 4? And you can literally just go patch exchange, and you'll flip those puppies around. Such that, say, for example, for something like, and I don't have this set up on key command, so I apologize for this. All right, I'm going to fix that right about now. There we go. All right. So then, kind of in Boss world, oh, stop that. Gosh, I totally dropped my train of thought. That is really totally annoying. I was talking about the ES3. In any case, gosh darn it. Gone. All right. Well, that was helpful. Something about the fact that there's a synonymous flow about these, even though they're very different types of devices. I found that there's a continuous thing, and this is one of the things that Jeff talks about, is that there are certain workflows that they've just kind of built into it. Arguably because maybe a bunch of these boxes are running same code. So to answer your question, my guess is very strongly that you can run a tap tempo at the very least as a MIDI. It would be a CC message, and it would be a momentary message. And it would probably initiate, the one way you could almost undoubtedly get there is to have a MIDI CC message that's a momentary message with a tap tempo, and you tap that puppy in, and that goes on down the line. Because one of the things that I've learned about the way Boss structures their stuff is they kind of let you, because there's so many different parameters and different blocks that you could target, they allow you to assign a MIDI CC number to a particular parameter that you want to adjust. In this case, the tap tempo. And that's exactly what I did on, there we go. That's what I did to basically map tap tempo from here to here. And essentially you kind of go into this menu inside here, which I'm not going to bore you with, other than to say, you kind of get there from the menu thing, you get into control assign, that's how you get there. And you basically have this other series of menus that come up, and those allow you to just basically kind of go, okay, I'm going to assign this MIDI CC number to this. The trick is, in a lot of those instances in Boss World, and I don't remember what it's 0 to 127 or 1 to 128, but you basically have to send no, I take it back. That's a momentary one. It's either a 0, 1, or a 2 to get it to do that. No, hold on a second. Message and value. I don't know the specific to do it from the ES8, I think you said. But the thing is that I am sure that if, as you get in there, my guess is either on the on the Wazoo Tube Amp expander, there should be, because I've been inside that deep editor, you should be able to get, because that editor, as I recall, and it's been a minute since I've been in there, but is a lot like the editor for the GT1000 core. So that means that they'll have this they'll have something like this. Hang on. Let's do this. GT1. There we go. All right. So they have something like this, and this is the control expression menu. And this little bit of goodness right here, although I realize you can't see it, but this is basically the up and down first foot switches there. This is control 1, which is the third foot switch. And then this is the additional functionality. And then basically what you can do is inside here, you can basically choose what it is that you're going to target. You choose whether it's on a patch or a system basis. And then inside this menu here, you get in an edit. And this is where you choose under the control source, you get into your MIDI CC numbers. Now, for a bunch of you, that was Greek, and for the rest of you, like, oh, Doppler, you're boring me. Go away. But the point being is that sort of functionality is kind of inside the boss code, and it's kind of how they do their lingo. And it's really cool because then you kind of go, okay, you basically then choose, like you saw in that little menu there, what MIDI number, a CC message number you want associated with it. Then what you sometimes have to do is choose how you're going to do the value with that. So the thing I was talking about with the either a 0 and 127 or 1 and 128 is that it's basically sometimes to get a certain thing, like if you want to target, let's say for example from your ES8 you wanted to turn the STE3000 in your Waza tube amp expander on and off. That's where you have to give it both you have to send it a CC message, and then you have to set the values inside there. You basically have to set two values basically on that one press, where it's a value of 0 and 127 or 1 and 128. It's just kind of how you do that, and on that, you don't put it on momentary, you put it on toggle because you're turning that unit on and off. Okay, so with that out of the way, okay, so let's see here. Yes, so Sean, let me know how that goes. And great purchases, super smart. Doug, what's going on, mate? Good to see you. Pleasure. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thingies, my nightmare. Oh, Tom, don't be bashful about asking your nightmare questions. Doug, thank you for showing me. I will explore it. I have been learning more about the CC messages. This is the whole thing. Is it's not really well documented. I encourage you to go into, if you go to RevAmp's YouTube channel, this last week's video that came out on Monday talks about some strategies around using controllers and whatnot. And I'm pretty sure in there I talked about programming that whole thing to those things, or that may have been on there is also a Boss GT1000 and 1000 core users group on Facebook, and one of those two places, just message me, DM me and I'll find where that is. But basically, I kind of went through the strategy of that. But it's and I use the Morningstar to do that. But I've kind of been doing it from lots of different directions. And I was doing some stuff with the ES3, which is basically the kid brother of yours, which is an amazing little unit. So yes, okay, yes. All right, let me jump back over to YouTube here and make sure I haven't missed any. Okay, no, we're still at the tennis balls. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and play a couple other sound samples of a couple of things that have been happening here in the background. So let's see. I'm going to, speaking of the D20, so this is going to be from that D20 series that I was talking about. This is going to be a clean clip of me running this board here. Key command, where are you? You're going to be, I'm going to move some stuff around here. You're going to be there, and you're going to be there. There we go. So I'm on 2. So this board right here, you're about to hear this board playing clean sound. Then we'll kind of talk about what it is. All right, now, one of the interesting things as we go into the live realm with our IRs, a minute ago I mentioned, like, hey, you can have 128 different speaker cabinet power amp combinations, which will drive your sound tech absolutely mad. So generally, if there was to be some advice, you would have a finite number of combinations of things of what you're going to do. And the idea is that way it's not kind of all over the place as your sound tech's trying to make everything fit. Because the best example of the best mixed most musically robust band I've ever heard was Dream Theater at the Berkeley Community Theater, which is where the movie Jimmy Plays Berkeley was filmed. It is a fairly large, cavernous place. I saw Metallica play with the San Francisco Symphony there. It's got a lot of room. It's a big, tall ceiling. It's a big room, and I just remember I had seats about halfway up, but ended up standing behind the person that was doing the front of house sound, just watching them. It was like they were another member of the band because the entire time they weren't. They were mixing with what was happening within the framework of the song. They were constantly working, but the sound was immaculate, and everybody's sound fit perfectly like that. And that's kind of the whole thing, is kind of going, not only what is it do I need to do to bring that part together, because that for me is kind of like my classic kind of slightly John Mayer, Jimi Hendrix kind of infused thing. And the other thing about this, it's over there on the floor. That is my road-worn 60s Strat that I had kind of retired, and I broke a string on. Sorry about it, Sean. I've got to change strings on Pinky. But I broke a string on this guitar, and I was like, all right, well, let me I don't know, let me pull up the old road-worn, because I kind of retired it. The new guitars are actually better sounding instruments, but I pulled that guitar out, and I was like, oh, there's a vibe here. I'm going to play another clip, and then we're going to talk about that. So here's the same guitar on what is probably my favorite thing on Strats these days for a lead tone, is the number 2, that is the all the way down and back one, with a little bit of the tone control backed off. Here's the same guitar. Basically, all that stuff is a GT1000 rig using the same basic. This is from this is not Speaker Mix Pro, but this will be using the 2 notes and their IRs from the Rev, and that is set on the basic stock Rev cabinet. All right, let's take a listen to that. This one was a lot of fun for me. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of tone for a single coil Strat. Like, those pickups are not anything quote unquote special, but there's a lot of woo kind of going on. That is kind of inside this little guy here is basically some of the different DS versions of the DS1 that they've gotten. And I have amassed this vintage DS1. In fact, I managed to kill it at one of the guitar camps. It just stopped working. I've got to send it off to Analog Man. But the vintage DS1s basically have chips that they can no longer make because I think they use lead in the process of making them, and they're not safe anymore to manufacture. But these vintage DS1s, black bottom with either a black screw or a silver screw, very, very special sounding pedals. And the neat thing is Boss has put some really great models of them into here. So the point being is that was also using the same speaker cabinet and model, and the idea is you're using kind of the same platform. Because ultimately, we're trying to do a couple of different things. And actually, this is, I see questions. I like that. Ultimately, we're trying to get stuff to stick together, right? We're looking for the glue factor. And when we have, I'm either a really good influence or a bad influence that way, because if you ultimately boil down most everything that I do, you're going to kind of begin to eventually kind of go, all right, he pulls out the Petrucci amp, pulls out the Petrucci guitar. In this particular case, lately, I purposely didn't, because when I pull out the Petrucci guitar, I pretty much always play the same riff. So I'm like, okay. And by the way, let's have a personal musical moment, because ultimately this is all about music. One of the things, whether it's as a demo musician or as a musician, we're going to be talking a lot more about this coming up. Oh, fine. Modes and More. Sometime in 2021, the tentative working title is Modes and More. And it's going to be an online course that may or may not be augmented with a Facebook group and or kind of live sessions for people that are in at some level of membership. That really the idea is not just like, all right, here are the modes, but the short version is this. There are 4 legs of the table. Leg number 1 is the fingerings are where you actually learn to evoke the initial sounds. And if I were to endeavor to pick up a guitar, the great value of the second finger root modes is you kind of run through them like that. And if you were to take a cookie cutter and kind of punch the upper note on the fourth string, middle note on the third string, and the lower note on the second string, with the exception of the Lydian mode, which has two notes on the third string and three notes on the second. But if you were to take that pattern and basically cookie cutter those triad shapes out of there, you'd be on your way to creating what I like to refer to as parallel chord voicings, 1, 3, 5. And then if you kind of get used to being able to see that intersection between that being the 1, 3, 5 of each of those modes, then it's pretty easy to go, if that's 1, 3, 5, this is 1, 3, 6. 1 flat 3, 5, 1 flat 3, 6. 1 flat 3, 5, 1 flat 3, flat 6. 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 6, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 6, 1 flat 3, 5, 1 flat 3, flat 6, 1 flat 3, flat 5, 1 flat 3, flat 6. So the intersection between those shapes does a lot to inform the next part of it, your brain. Because if you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you can see that's 1 through 5. If that's 5, that's 6. That's 1 through 5, 1 through 6. And if you were to compare the Dorian mode to the major scale, and you find that Dorian's got a flat 3 and a flat 7, this is 1 flat 3, 5 instead of 1 3, 5. And it's going 1 flat 3, 5, and then 1 flat 3, 5, 6. This bit is the next piece of it. Then the final piece of that is your ear begins to recognize the difference between a major chord and a minor chord. And a major chord with a natural 6 and a minor chord with a natural 6 and a minor chord with a flat 6. And your ear now gets invited to the party. And then the last little piece, believe it or not, is this thing called technique. Because if you happen to hit unwanted open strings, it really gets in the way of getting the actual point across. The point being is that all of those things factor into this getting an intention across. And so with your intention, ultimately, most of us, that means that we want to sit down and record something that we listen back and go, that was this feeling through these ears and these fingers conveyed, and I was able to realize that. And that, honestly, if you think about it, given the millions of people who play guitar, most of us don't get there. So what we find, though, is we have a series of staples. And in the process of that, we have a tendency to regurgitate ideas as opposed to chase new ones. The long-winded version of that is to say, as I'm working on creating these little micro songs and these demos, what my goal is each time is I'll come back to some little stylistic template and then I'll mess with it. And I'm like, because at this point I'm doing enough demo content that people will either go, he's playing the same stuff over and over, or he's like, oh, that's interesting, he did that. It's like something I've heard before, but he's challenging. Like that Les Paul thing at the top, I was like, I'm just going to kick my butt. I'm just going to take myself someplace that's going to take a little bit of time to work into, but what I'm going to learn in the process of kind of, breaking through that thing is going to allow me to go someplace that I wouldn't have been able to go, such the next time I go someplace from there, I can go to someplace I hadn't gone before. And in that way, I'm not getting stuck, and it also makes it more exciting for people who want to watch whatever it is that's happening. Okay, so let's see. There we go. Okay, I have a non-topic question. I know you mentioned you are using an overhead mic that you mic into Universal Audio, but thingies, Rode cable doesn't seem to work into Apollo, the input. Okay, so Tom, knowing that you know many things and work with computers, we're just kind of go, and this is one of my favorite things to do, is distance troubleshoot, because it's just so much fun to kind of like, all right, so one, when you say the cable doesn't work, swap the cable, because if it's a Rode shotgun, it should just be another XLR. Swap those out. 2, double check you've got your phantom power on. So this is one of the things, just about every shotgun I've ever used, and I would say every shotgun that I've used requires phantom power. That may be your albatross. Turn the volume down before you test that. But that, my guess would be that's what's giving you a hard time there. Not necessarily a question. No. And this is the thing, is like, honestly, the one of the things I love about doing what I get a chance to do is if there's a mistake to make, my goal is to make it before you do, so you don't have to make it. Or if you do, it's like, oh, he was talking about that. Right. Oh, got it. So my guess is you haven't assigned phantom power to that guy, and that's where you're running into that. And again, the first thing to do, ladies and gentlemen, if it's not working, swap the cable. Just first thing, regardless of what it is, it's not working. Making sure that if there's a load on something, you're not, okay. Let's back up just one step. When you're using the speaker out of an amplifier, and you're running into some sort of reactive load box like, the 2-notes torpedo captor X, you want to make sure that you never run that amplifier without that box connected when you're actually running that thing as if you're using it. That is to say, if you've got a speaker cable coming out of that thing and you don't have that speaker cable running into a cabinet or your captor X, and you've got that thing open, that is to say not in standby, you're wanking away on that thing, that is bad. That head needs to see a load as you're playing away on it. So some amplifiers these days, like the 2-notes, D20 has an internal reactive load that if you use without a cabinet, you are best advised to always make sure that there's a button back there. Now, as I recall in the manual, so don't quote me on it, no liability. In the manual, I think it says if it senses that there's no speaker cable plugged in, it automatically injects the reactive load. But again, that may or may not actually be the case because maybe you've got a build that's a different build or whatever. So the point being is you can always presume that you either need to have the reactive load on a switch there or the speaker cable going into a cabinet or into a reactive load box. And the cool thing about the reactive load boxes is you can actually use this through and run into a speaker cabinet at the same time you're taking a tap to go out to your DAW or PA, which is great. But the point being is that in that sort of an instance, if you're not getting any sound, that's not where you want to go, hey, let me just pull my, this other cable out. When I'm very, 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 very careful when I'm using, especially an amp like the JP2C, which is not a cheap amplifier, I'm always super careful because that's the opportunity to blow up your head. And that's an expensive mistake. So the idea is like, okay, you know what? Let me just stand by the amp. Let me turn it off. Let me check all my connections. And then I fire it back up. It's just worth being extra careful in this. And so with everything, with the exception of speaker cables and reactive load boxes, my whole thing is like, let me just swap the cable. Because, I have a student who is getting ready to be a huge rock star, I think, and they had an experience where they're like, it's not working. I was like, swap your guitar cable. It was a brand new cable, and that's what it was. And so, cables. Tom, I lived off a DS1 into a PV Bandit. Laugh out loud. Get the lead out. I love it. All right. Hey, Leonard, what's going on? Doug, we opened for Michael Schenker at the Fat Cat together in Modesto in 2008, 2009. It's a pleasure. Good to see you, man. That is awesome. Hey. Long time. Too long. Cheers. Good to see you. Awesome. Not XLR. It's a mini laugh out loud phantom power check. Okay. It's a mini 1/8" cable that I tried to convert to a 1/4" tip ring sleeve. Okay. Okay, the mini 1/8". I would suggest just buying maybe a it's an 1/8" TRS. Okay, hang on. Yeah, you said tip ring sleeve. Okay. I would suggest finding a cable that is going on to. I would just go into Sweetwater. Actually, this is not an Amazon thing. I would suggest going to Sweetwater and get an 1/8" TRS to XLR, and biting a bullet and finding somebody that makes that cable right. Hosa would be a great start. Hosas are not the bestest, but their quality is certainly good enough. Yeah. Yes, and yes. Okay. Well, let's see here. Ooh. Okay. So, hang on. There we go. Well, when I mouse over. Can you do a demo running wet, dry, wet with a rev amp speaker out mixed with an IR out? So the answer is yes, and thank you for adding that to the request list. I don't have any issues with the request list because basically the whole rigs side of things is actually kind of one of the areas that's going to get some attention in Tom. Awesome, great. He already ordered. Uh, this is the thing. This is one of the unique things that I have the ability to do, and I love seeing, when people, uh, Sean, he saw this pink Strat and he was like, I think I'll have one of those. One of the unique privileges is to be able to kind of gear test stuff for people, and then have them have a really positive experience with it, right? That's kind of what the gear demo world is about. So one of the unique things is that what you don't see a lot of is rig driven things. And here's the thing. Your average guitar player has one rig, unless you're Chris Stark, and then you got a whole room full of stuff. But the point being is that most of us just kind of go, here is my rig. This is my sound. So if you want to make some big change or change the whole thing, there's very little information out there that's really rig centric about, hey, here are these templated things. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go into a sub ramble about this, but it's very, 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 very important what we're going to talk about. Oh, I'm in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, great. So the deal is, if you take a look at what's going on here, I actually want to go here, and I want to go here. All right, so if you take a look, when I step on this guy, it says clean, OD, chunk, and lead. I think we've talked about this a little bit, but this really reared its head in the Rev video this past week. And so the idea is, and let's see, there we go. So this one's, my clean is patch 35, OD is 36, chunk is 37, and lead is 38. So the deal is when I'm in the box like this, especially on a smaller device, again, this could easily be subbed out for an HX stomp, but you have, a limited number of foot switches. Basically, kind of whether it's going back to, my days with the HT500, traditionally I want to have 4, and this is everybody. We want 4 sounds: clean, overdrive, chunk, and lead, that we can randomly access between it. And on a box where you kind of random access only happens in steps up and steps down, so it's not really random at all, this sort of control is really important. So in turn, the ability with CC messages to target individual blocks inside there is the dealio. Hang on, let me see if I can target the, there we go. So watch what happens as I target this little guy right here. I said watch what happens as it targets this little guy right here. What the heck? Oh, sorry, I don't have it set up for that patch. Let me try that again from right here. There we go. All right, so now watch what happens kind of up over there, up there. Oh, wait a second. Hold on. All right, why am I seeing it? Oh, there we go. Okay, it's a little delayed. All right, so that's basically inside this patch right here. It's saying, all right, I'm going to turn and if you look up their ski, you're going to see that orange block turn on or off. And so basically I'm targeting that individual block inside that individual patch, and I'm able to do that. There's a little bit of a lag here for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why, but maybe I'm watching. No, I'm not watching the stream. In any case, the point being is that I'm able to target each of those individual blocks inside the stomp there, and to do that. What does that have to do with the wet, dry, wet? The point being is that the strategy of using whatever it is that you're using as a setup, generally speaking, we got to figure out a way of, we're going to have a clean tone, we're going to have an overdriven tone, we're going to have a crunch tone, and we're going to have our lead tone. And generally, our crunch tone has enough gusto that if we need to play a couple of licks there, that if we go up to the top of the neck, it doesn't thin out, and or we just know we need to go to the neck pickup, right? But the point being is that 4, I like to call it 4 on the floor strategy, means that we know that no matter what we're doing with our setup, we kind of have to have those 4 things. The other variation is basically 3 versions of it: a clean, kind of a crunch, and a lead, or a clean and an overdrive and a lead. But the things I generally believe, we really want the nuance of 4, because we want to have that third gear in place. If we kind of want to play something that's got a little bit more something to it than a traditional overdriven tone, we've got the ability to step on the gas there. But the point being is that strategy of having that kind of into the core of your rig there is very little other than around, and honestly, most of the time, with the exception of the guys at Worship Tutorials who are doing really, really good work, there's usually very little around the like, here are the four pieces of this rig centric way you're going to use this live. And I think because of that, if we take that into the virtual world, well, what are, 4 or 5 pedals that we can use together to get a great sound through this particular amplifier? And you can substitute this, other pedal. But the idea is there's very little good content out there on how to do that. So this whole stereo things, like, well, what are two good amps to put together? Paired amps that are identical amps. The D20s are the most feature-rich, best choice amps for those of you that are going to be inclined to use pedals in front of amplifiers. They are the ability to, as you pointed out, take the direct out, and I'll just kind of riff on that with or without the power amp. Then you got the virtual power amps. Then once you're inside the box, you can split it into stereo. You've got all sorts of crazy stuff. The other thing is, just for pits and giggles, as long as we're talking about stereo, Captor X basically gives you the ability to come out of a mono amplifier and create a stereo signal. That is rocket sauce. Basically the same thing that's happening inside Speaker Mix Pro is that you have if you look right here, well, you can't see it because you can't see my mouse, but basically there's a pan control across each one of those 6 channel strips. They're basically, it's a mono source that immediately splits into stereo with some sort of magic that you can then basically, you can pan it from left to right, or on the channel strip in Pro Tools, when you basically have a mono input and a stereo plug-in, it immediately gives you 2 pan controls, one that's dialed all the way over to the left and the other that's right. You can bring them into the center, and you can hear it's just like, in the center there's no weird artifact, and you flip them back out, it goes stereo. They have cooked some magic sauce that is really pretty remarkable, and the DSRs feel great. All right, so that is to say, the various incarnations of stereo, the idea of wet and dry, the idea of wet, dry, wet. For those of us that go back to the Lukather school, I've got, and you'll probably get sick of me saying this because they're still up in the amp closet, as I call it. I've got basically an alcove that was in a bedroom that we sealed off and encapsulated, and I've run cabling up there. But that's where I've got 2 of the Boogie open back top 212, close back bottom 212, 412 cabinets that are like the 212 version that Lukather was using for his wet of his wet dry rig. And I believe there was a 412 either Boogie or Marshall cabinet in the center, but he was using 212s on the side there. And he was using the open back, close back, of which I've got the 2 412 versions of. And my buddy, who I won't mention his name, is going to loan me a third one of those. So we're going to build a wet dry wet. We're going to have a feeling my buddy Mason, who's as madly passionate about stereo as I am, we're going to do some wet dry wet thing to demonstrate what you can do in that instance. And so the idea of creating those different templates and demonstrating what they sound like and talking about how you architect those rigs, especially, for people like Chris Stark, who are as maniacal. Okay. Okay, so Chris, I love you, bro. So what I believe Andy is doing is, I think he's got a room that's kind of over yonder where he's miking the actual amps up. And that's why he's got the phones on, he's got the microphone, but I think he's got a mixer off to his right-hand side, and I think he's just got a mic'd up in the other room. And what I believe is the amps are there, and he's got the cabinets off yonder. That way he's not getting ridiculous bleed and any potential hiss. But his streaming sound is unreal. Which, by the way, if any of you haven't seen, and any of you, if you have any interest in getting even a decent tone for live streaming and just want to either feel grossly shamed or totally inspired, hopefully, I won't hold that finger up, totally inspired, go watch one of Andy Timmons' live streams. They are and Larry Mitchell too. But I will say, what Larry does is Larry's got it all in the box. Larry's magic, magic Larry. So let's just leave it there, pure magic. What Andy does is he's actually using, live amps and ruling with live amps. I do not believe he's using reactive loads. I believe he's got a room down the hall where he's got the cabinets mic'd up, and it sounds unreal. 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 Gabe Metzger, what's going on? Love stereo and wet dry wet rigs. So much gear though. Yes, yes, and yes. Yes, we love that. All right, hang on a second. Hold on, we got more coming up here. Okay. All right, G-Man. Have a great one, and yes, thank you. Ditto. Be safe. All right. Okay. All right. What's going on, my man, Matthew? How you doing? All right. Have you played more with those Celestion DSR things? Anyway, can we hear those versus the IR of the same speaker? Yes, that is in. If you go to my YouTube channel, because I don't have the clip isolated, I'm not going to kind of scrub. I managed to peel off a couple of demo clips, but what I did not isolate was just the kind of the clip of the DSR and the IR of the H string into the vintage 30s of the DSR and then the IR. So that is on there. It's about, I don't know, halfway through there. I don't know. You just scrub it. You'll see me holding the 8 string. And so the thing about it is that it especially as you begin to turn it up, you got to begin to go, okay. So to answer the implicit question, what was the difference between the DSRs and the IRs? First of all, the feeling underneath the hands is extremely noticeable. The other thing is that feeling translates to what you're going to do as you're sitting in the track. That is to say, my favorite analogy is playing a tweed amplifier. Like the first time you sit down with a guitar and a tweed amplifier, I was going to say it'll put hair on your chest, but maybe for any of the women that may be watching, that is the wrong analogy. It's like walking a tightrope while playing a guitar. You kind of go, oh, because it's a really fast amp. And so because of that, you have to learn to get loose with the time. And like things happen so quickly with your hands, you can't be like, Texas blues, that kind of sloppiness on a tweed generally does not translate very well because it's super fast and the transients come off of there really quickly. Even if you turn it up, for the Neil Young thing, that kind of vibe, it distorts, but it's still a faster amplifier than a traditional blackface type of a dealio. So the point being is as you play with different amps, you begin to have this dynamic interaction with them. So I found that the IRs were less dynamically interactive, and I found that, and as I say in that particular demo, I was like, I would have played differently if I were playing just through the IRs, but I found that the DSRs just gave me a little bit more girth in the track. And one of the things as a player that you're always looking for is the kind of the anti-tweed experience, like that, where the tweed is this really like, you really have to mind your P's and Q's. Like every little pick, nuance, it just hears everything, and it's right there. And it's also an amp that has a tendency not classically to be bright, but very present. And with an amp that's present in right-hand picking technique, it's not hiding anywhere. So the experience of I would have had a little less girth to move with the IRs. And so they just sound a little less full. They stand up pretty well because obviously Celestion, is still making IRs. But that is in there. And then tomorrow I'm shooting the second video in the Celestion thing. And the overarching goal of that is to basically deconstruct what I was doing in the first one, so I can talk about, okay, this is what I was doing, because I didn't go, all right, here's, this is what I'm using here, and it's going to be more of for those people that are going to endeavor to get the plugin, which is $299, I think, and now it's on sale for $200. At least it was when I last looked, and you get 10 DSRs with it, and it's basically 10 speakers in whatever combination of cabinets you want. And if you're looking for some suggestions, I would suggest the G12M greenbacks in a 412 and a 212 open back, so that's 2. A Celestine blue in an open back, that's 3. The vintage 30 in a 412. The G12 T75 in a 412. That's 5. The H, the anniversary 30H, H30, as in a 112 open back enclosure. And then I think maybe I went for 112 each of the greenback and the blue, and then I went for a 412, no, a 212 creamback 65, which was awesome. You know, hang on a second. That one is worth finding. So if you guys will bear with me for a second, you know what? Yes, I can do this. Give me a moment. I'm going to have to scrub a little bit to do this. So you know what? Let me, before I go to do that, let me grab Slide Wonder. I actually have a box. It's called the PHAZER Phaser, and it is from Radial, and it's a red box, and they've made specifically that box, and you basically dial that other one in. Okay, hang on. Let me pull up this clip. It's going to take me a minute to find it. I'm going to have to scrub on the timeline, and while I'm doing that, I'm not going to be able to speak. All right, so choose file, and I'm probably able to speak now. SMP renders final 2. Okay, good. The A and the B side of the plugin. Let's take a listen. There are no. So that was, let me make sure I've got audio here. Testing, where's my level? Where'd my meters go? All right, I'm just going to believe I've got level here. So that was, you could probably see the little icons down below. That was switching between the DSR and the IR. And in fact, I'm going to play that again. You'll just hear that the IR has got just a little bit less low end. Let's see if it stays where it was on the timeline. And resume last video. There we go. Different applications for this plugin. Identically inside the A and the B side of the plugin. Let's take a listen. There are a number of different applications for it. All right, so the whole thing that I hear in that when I'm down on the DSR, the bottom end has this richness in this body. That the whole thing about playing an 8-string, especially when you start cranking it up, is the amount of low end you move. Like for a guitar player, you're like, yes. I want to pull up another clip which was using the Creamback 65s and an ES335, because part of what I'm also doing is trying to discover different sounds that have not necessarily been part of my dealio. Oh, there we go. Hey, Tom just posted the Stage It. So if you go to Stage It, STAGEIT.com, and search for Andy Timmons, he's on there Saturdays, and he usually does 2 shows, and it's awesome. All right, let me find the ES335 with the Creamback 65s. Resume last video. Plugin. But primarily, picking up where Ken left off. All right, in case, shush. In case the look isn't pretty obvious, that's me having an amazing time. And as you can probably tell from the amps back there, they weren't the revs. And although there were two of them back there, it was a single Fender Tone Master Deluxe reverb. And basically what I was doing was I was coming out of the direct out. And by the way, the Tone Master is a solid state amp, modeling amp. Should I say solid state? Let's say modeling amplifier that sounds amazing. And there are three output selections you've got. Basically, on the original one, the blackface, you've got a 57 and 121 or no emulation. And the newer one, you got a combination of 57 and a 421 and no emulation. And what you were hearing there was coming out of the XLR out, no emulation, and then using the Creamback 65 DSR in a 212 open back cabinet, kind of thinking Robin Ford. Robin Ford's traditionally, although it's not the Creamback, uses a 65 watt Celestins in his Dumble rig, which is why I chose those speakers. The traditional Dumble cabinet, as opposed to laying it on its side, they have a tendency to lay it like this. I should say, as opposed to they lift it up like that, so it's taller than it is wider and it's open back. And so that's me kind of hanging out in my John Mayer 335. That's my buddy Mason Marangella from Vertex's 335 that he knows is on it. And an ever extended loan. I love that guitar, and it just totally takes me someplace else, which is the whole reason. Tell your co-inhabitors, if you have a co-inhabitor, that more guitars help you create more music. And that's really the thing that I'm learning more and more is each one of these instruments, so long as it makes sense in the framework of the style or styles that I'm going for, they enable to have a voice that I wouldn't have otherwise. And that 335 thing, I was like, but that particular, so that's, again, a modeling amplifier coming out direct and then utilizing Speaker Mix Pro. My kind of go-to thing, and I'll be talking about this in this next Speaker Mix Pro video, which will be on my YouTube channel, is that it is the blend of the 121 and the 57. That's just kind of my go-to. Is like, but what I also have a tendency to do is put them on both sides of the stereo field. So instead of just using two cabinets, one with a 121 and a 57, I'll put two instances of that across the stereo field. And it just really kind of is a magical thing. Okay. Yes, you can interchange wave IRs and DSRs freely. So any existing IRs, the women will grow hair too. You could use a little less girth. So the DSR sounds really the IR. First of all, the IR sounds really good, but it's just a little less bouncy. And here's the thing: I will say this: the whole thing about the player is your job is, again, the analogy being, I remember the feeling of playing. The goal of the Guitar Hero thing was all that stuff, and somebody else mentioned it. It was under NDA that is probably expired. No, I actually won't mention it, but they spilled the beans, so I don't need to. But there were things that we did to try and make it feel as much like the original track. So the idea is you're playing this very, nothing wrong with this, the Palmer per se, but it is a non-reactive load. You're basically just putting a load on a speaker, taking that signal, running into a box, running that box in there. The great thing about a reactive load is it's sending information back to the power amp section from this kind of virtual speaker, and this interaction is the magic of what makes a reactive load box reactive. But the idea is that an IR is, even if it's in the framework of a reactive load environment, there's one of the things that they've built into Speaker Mix Pro is what they call the Z curve, or as the British call Z curve. And that's basically dealing with this interaction between the power amp and the speaker. It's they've got some secret sauce going on in there. You can also choose how hard you're driving the speaker. And this is one of the other things about the way when you're working in an environment with something like the JP2C, that's an amp. I just, every time I plug in the Petrucci 7-string, the volume goes up. And part of that sound is and I'll say this over and over, it's me beating that I've got the tall, again, boogie cabinets, turning those suckers up. There's a reason those cabinets, the regular vintage 30s are, 200, are 60, I think the regular vintage 30s are 60 or 65 watts. And the ones that are in the boogie cabinets are 70 watts, if I've got it right. It's 60 or 65, but the ones in the boogies, as I recall, it makes the boogies to 280 cabinets, I think. Um, so vintage 30 is kind of, it's a slightly misleading name, but the point being is the ones in the boogie cabinets, they purposely put a higher wattage version of a vintage 30 because they knew what people like me were going to do to those. And so, turning those suckers up, those tall boogie cabinets sound amazing. All right. Okie dokie. So let's see here. All right. Let's see here. Gabriel, audio is good. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that, Chris. Gabriel, I love the 8 string. So the funny thing is, first of all, I'm sure pretty much everybody here knows who Mark Lettieri is, who's, the master of the baritone guitar and amongst other things. Just kind of a terrifying, amazing guitar player who's been on the show. But the thing is that much of the time when I think about an 8 string, I'm actually thinking about what you can do in terms of the non-distorted sound. Because as a funk kind of jazz instrument, whether it's Tosin or, just as a clean sound, it is an amazing instrument. And so that's one of the things I'm going to be doing more with that instrument. And so it is a lovely, lovely, lovely sound for that. But then when you really want to get it kind of nasty, there I've got Dimarzio 8 string pickups in there because obviously it's an 8 string guitar. But they make a huge range of sonic palatability. And I love that guitar. It really and like a drop E. Like, what the heck is that? An octave below low E. I mean, it's like, Gabe, it's like, yes. It's like, any bass player that you'd be playing next to in the room would be like, they'd be like snipping the strings. They'd be like, don't use that thing. Kidding, but kind of not. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I've cleared most of the topics. These days, I'm kind of shooting for an hour-and-a-half show. And first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody that is here and that is hung out and asked such great questions. I hope. Brenton. Okay. Oh, got it. Oh, thank you. I missed you, my friend. Sorry about that. Brenton Meinl. GT1000 Gore. How do I plug stereo pedal in? MIDI or question mark? And how am I going to get? And how do I do wet, dry, wet as well from GT? Okay. So a couple of things about this guy. This right here is the send and return for loop 1, and this is the send for loop 2. Each of these loops, hang on, let's get inside the deep editor. Is that? No. Oh, hang on. Oh, I've moved stuff around. Hang on. Let me get over to the deep editor. Where have I hidden it? There we go. All right, hang on a second. So, I am looking for the loops. There we go. So, these two guys right here in green are the loops. Come on. Oh, what an idiot. I'm clicking on my streaming application as opposed to the deep editor. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay. So, okay. Okay. So, to make them function in stereo, you basically sacrifice one of your loops. So watch what happens when stereo link is on or off. These are basically, if you take a look, there's an up arrow and a down arrow indicating that they are. Hang on a second. Yeah, you'll have to excuse me. I have not got this completely memorized, and I should know this. So let me say that the operative words, I believe that those loops, and now I'm getting my helix and my boss confused a little tiny bit, but I believe those loops, And now I'm getting it confused with the ES3. And, right, okay, I think those loops... Hang on. Let me actually answer that question. Let me see if I can answer that articulately quickly, because but I think the loops are both mono, and so that stereo merge function basically links them together, and so basically you use the two inputs and the two outputs to sync them. The what I do with these guys, and if you're going to run this into the front end of an amplifier, or arguably even into the loop using the 4-cable method, I actually do not suggest using the main output, because the main output on this guy, let's see if I can actually get to the right, there we go. The main output of this guy, as you turn it up or down, you have zero feedback. There's no kind of little notch spot of detente. And up here, it's too hot for the front end of the amplifier. And then if you kind of go, all right, that's a sweet spot, and you actually accidentally bump it as you're moving it, there literally is nowhere in the entire interface or the deep editor that gives you a readout of exactly where this guy is set, which basically means if I use the main outputs, which are over here-ish, and I use this as the control, and I have a tube screamer, and I set this thing, let's just say arbitrarily this guy was at high noon, and I've got a tube screamer, and I'm coming out of the main outputs into the front end of my amplifier back there. That relationship of how hard that tube screamer is hitting those amplifiers is going to be completely changed when I turn this up or turn that down, which is not what you want. So that's why actually using the loops here is important. So for the 4-cable method, I come in here. This is the stereo input. It's got a stereo input. Yep. Sorry, that must have looked very strange. This is a send and return from the first loop here. And so this is where I go out to the front end of the D20. This is where I return from the effect send on the D20. So that's loop 1, the send and return for loop 1 here. And then the send on loop 2 goes into the effects return on the D20. And then that kind of goes out into, DAW land. So if you wanted to do wet, dry, wet, there are a couple of different ways that you can get there. Well, first of all, in the DAW, it's super easy. But let me just think about how I would do that inside GT1000 Core. Make me work for this. And stop it. Hang on a second. I'm going to move this thing that's hanging out all the way over there. You guys won't know, but I do. You're going over to number 3. There we go. All right. So if I were going to go wet, dry, wet, it depends on what I was going to go wet, dry, wet to. But let's just say I want to go wet, dry, wet to a DAW. I would leverage one of the sends. Hang on, let me, what patch am I on? Let me just do one thing here real quick. Okay, let me just do one thing. I'm gonna no guarantees what kind of trouble I'm going to come up with, but I'm headed for trouble. So let's see. It takes a minute for this thing to sync up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a new patch. Come on. Wait, no, I don't want to be on that patch. I want to be on. What the hey? What did I do? Okay, hang on a second. I want to go here. All right, I'm going to copy that puppy over. Wait for it to load. Sorry, guys. We're going to get someplace intelligent in a moment. Takes a minute for all this stuff to sync up. It happens right away on the face of the GT1000, but because I'm streaming and there's a little bit of offset on the deep editor coming from the face of the GT1000 core. But in a moment, this little guy will illuminate, allowing me to basically save this over the next preset. But basically what I'm going to do is try and see if I can kind of find an easy way to create There we go. All right, so we're going to go right, and we're going to write this guy up to 39. Okay. That's going to take a minute to sync, but while it's doing that, and I apologize if I'm... No, Brenton, don't apologize. This is good. Okay, start to draw. Okay, so let's say... I am 99% positive that this is a stereo path. But we need to get true stereo outputs. Got it. Okay, so, all right. So here's the deal: wet, dry, wet. Yes. Hang on a second. Okay. Right. Here we go. I'm gonna totally mess this thing up. Where'd my second divider go? I've never done what I'm trying to do here, but I know I can use this other divider. Come on. Why are you not letting me do what I want to do? Oh, because you're not a divider. What an idiot. There we go. You are what I want to try and... Oh, there we go. Tool. There we go. Okay, I'm pretty sure I've got this right, but basically we've got our path here. This business here come on. Why are you not letting me drag you? Come on. You are just being persnickety. All right, for whatever reason, my computer's a little angry at me. So, Brent, I'm going to walk you through what I think would be the solution. I would basically take these two and drag them onto this lower divider here. Okay, and then what I would do is I would sync these two in a stereo link. You going to let me drag you here? All right, hang on. Let's see if I can maybe just need to create... Why are you just not being nice to me? All right, so I would basically... This guy right here is basically when you've got this guy set up for dual instead of single. Single basically ABs back and forth between the two. We've got these set up on dual, so it's a Y. So it basically splits the signal. I would basically take this split signal and run it all the way out into the main outputs and run the main outputs using this this virtual amp here, and I would do it like that. This guy right here, we want it in stereo, okay? And that's going to enable us to have just basically on this output here, we're going to take the B level and turn that off, and this is our B send. This is our A send, this is our B send. So what we've done is we're saying we're just taking this top row here, and that's continuing on. We're taking this little bit right here, and it's not passing on through here. If for whatever reason, if this thing were to be a little bit nicer to me than it is right now, and I don't know why it's doing it, but I would drag this send and return down into here, and I would keep that in stereo, and I would then make sure that I've got an amp in front of that. Why are you just not... Oh, I know why, because I was in the middle of an attempted save. All right, I bet I can do it now. That is the strangest thing ever. And I am thoroughly irritated. Okay, why are you not letting me move anything? Because you hate me. All right, well, okay, so let's imagine, again, like I've done, I've paired these guys together, the stereo link. I move this I drag this guy down onto this other divider here. I make sure that amp 2 is before that. That way I'm sending a virtual amplifier 2 that, and if you've noticed it says aired preamp 2, but it says deluxe combo. So I would basically be sending that out to those guys, and then before that deluxe combo, and for some reason it's not letting me move blocks, I don't know why, I would put a stereo delay, which I would probably using my master delay, and drag that down there before the amplifier, and then I would have that split after the amplifier, and actually probably put the amplifier, then the stereo delay, and then the split. And in that fashion, you're taking the two, and then I would take the delay, and I would turn that effect level all the way up. And so this is a stereo path. It would actually technically be this delay, but the point being is you would take the direct level off, you turn the effect level all the way up. This amp would, in theory, be going into the delay because we want to run that amp tone, in theory, into the delay, and then in turn out into this guy. I'm sorry that whatever reason is not cooperating with me, but that allows us to run our dry sound along the top out through the main output, and that is where you're going to use that kind of that main output control there to into your DAW. And then this other chain here, again, in theory, it's going to start off with an amplifier and then into a stereo delay, and then out these two outputs. And you don't necessarily, yeah, you probably do want to sync them just to ensure that they're following that one's left and one's right. And that is where, when you turn this delay to 100% wet by taking the direct signal out of the equation right there, that's going to give you your wet with one side of this, dry and wet. And then basically what you would do is you, on the outputs of this guy, you would take the, you would take these, oh, come on. There you go. You would take these two outputs right here, which are, and you would run, sorry, it's actually going to be this one right here and this one right here. That's the send on loop 1 and the send on loop 2, and you would run those into, if you will, inputs number 1 and 3 on your DAW, and the main output in mono into input number 2. And that way, as you kind of line those up on input, they would come up as wet, dry, wet. And that way you kind of know it's wet, dry, wet, and they're kind of always in that order. Gosh, that was harder to do than I had hoped it would be, but it's still a great question. Yes, good. Okay. Well, so Andreas, you know, the interesting thing is that, yes, an 8-string, it can save you, but I will say there is nothing like actually picking up a bass, and I know it's not going to sound right coming through my shotgun, but a great sounding bass has a vibe to it that, first of all, when I become, you know, 8-string kind of guitar dude, it is a whole different extravaganza. I just play differently. It's just a different vibe, and I'm not. Yes, it's one of the solutions. But one of the things I'm getting ready to do here is I'm about to buy some new cameras, and part of the endeavor is to not only be able to use this part of the space when I live stream, but also to be able to use that part of the space. Because one of the things that frustrates me is not being able to actually demo and tweak sounds live. And sometimes it's just not, with the way I'm set up for a particular demo that I'm working on, striking this stuff and setting up other things is not necessarily as easy. The other thing is I have a second space upstairs that's actually set up for live streaming, and I've streamed not once out of there, but I'll be utilizing that space as well. But that gives me another option to be able to actually demonstrate these things in real time and actually, you know, kind of, all right, well, hang on, let me plug in the bass and, you know, kind of do all of that. And actually go and have a couple of things that are on tap that are ready to go. So those are things that I want to do. Yes, and it sounds way more defined. I mean, the other thing is it's got these big, ginormous strings, and the size of the frets. When you play that thing, it's this tactile thing that is just lovely. But here's the thing. Options are great, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Brenton, thank you. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, I am going to head off and spend a little time with the wife. I wish each of you a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week. I thank you for hanging out. I hope this has been insightful or helpful or at least humorous. The idea is the whole reactive load thing and the IR thing. We're there. And that includes the acoustic IR thing, which we didn't talk about in this round. But per the title slide, I think I unmuted myself here. There we go. We are talking about reactive load boxes and IRs, part 1. So we are at the beginning of this conversation. And as I continue to endeavor to learn more, the goal is that we can kind of talk about this, and hopefully I can answer the range of very intelligent questions people have. And honestly, feel free to ask the questions that, maybe seem less than, here's the thing. We all at some point start off knowing nothing. And then we, hopefully are dealing and ask questions. Tom, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hopefully your challenge goes well. By the way, and not that I would expect it to be that way with Rode, but every so often we just get a piece of gear that just doesn't work. So, it happens. All right. Thank you so much. Sean, ditto, ditto, ditto. Everybody have a great one, and I'll see you next week. Cheers. Look forward to it. Later.